Thank you very much, MC, for a very kind intro. Where's the MC? Yeah, thank you very much for the very kind introduction for me and the rest of the panelists. I hope everyone here is really learning a lot from the session, the 3 previous sessions. Maybe to begin, right, let me just share an experience that I've just had this morning. So you see here, this is the fasting month. I know most of us in Singapore, right? So this is the month of Ramadan. So in the early morning today, right, at 5 a.m., what myself and my family do every morning before we start our fast is to have a session where we eat, right? You know, we Muslims will eat in the morning. So we had a very small discussion, and today's discussion is basically it's a Saturday, right? So I have with me at my table myself, my wife, and my 3 daughters. They are all in primary school. So the eldest is in primary 6, the second is in primary 5, the third is in primary 3, and the last one is 2-year-old. But the 3 of them can fast. So they all, we eat in the morning together. So Saturday being Saturdays, you know what we have to do with our kids, right? For most of you all here who are parents, is that our kids have a whole day of activities. Ballet class, and I think Cynthia just went off because she has to fetch her kid from a tuition class. So we had a discussion. My daughter was asking, so how's your day? What do we have today? So I told my eldest daughter, who's in primary 6, I'm gonna moderate a talk on digital safety and well-being. And the next thing she asked me, is it gonna be recorded? Is it gonna be on YouTube? Can we watch it on YouTube? Then I was like, because that's how they say, yeah, that's a good question. Perhaps later I can ask the organizer whether it's actually recorded on YouTube. But I know that they only want to watch 3 minutes of my clip on YouTube, but the other 5 or 10 minutes is what they want to watch their programs on YouTube. So that's how I guess our kids or my kids operate, right? So on that note, then I look at my wife, and the first thing on my mind is, so are the parental controls on YouTube still on? So yeah, and then, but I didn't ask my wife. That was my first thought. So I guess it is very opportune that we have this discussion with a group of experts and heads and directors from all the 4 different social media companies. Because as parents, right, we realize that our job is we need all the help that we can get. And my experience as a parent, as well as speaking with a lot of other parents, right, is that our first line of help that we hope we get from are the social media companies themselves, right? What do they do to actually protect our kids? What are the kind of restrictions and controls that they have in their platform to actually help us in protecting our kids? So I'm glad that we have here the 4 social media experts and leads in their own platforms. So let's find out more about how or what they have been doing to partner us parents in protecting and promoting safety and digital well-being for our kids. Okay, so without further ado, let me start by asking a question. Maybe we can start by maybe Rachel. Can you share with the audiences some findings or some kind of research findings that has been found by Google in regard to this issue of parental and child digital safety? Yeah.
Thank you, Elmie, and it's really a delight to be here with everyone today on a Saturday morning. Before I kind of get started, I thought maybe just to situate a bit about like my own journey and experience. So I'm a mother of 2 toddlers, so they are on a variety of YouTube Kids and also YouTube because my son loves watching fishing videos. You can ask me about that another time, but which are not available on YouTube Kids, right? So but I am starting this journey of learning what it is to prepare my family to be online, and I particularly appreciated the sharing earlier. I grew up in the age of ICQ, for those who remember, and also was about to meet somebody offline that I had met online, some random stranger, and I was sharing with Clara that I was so naive at the time. I was like, what? No problem, what? This person was so friendly and whatever, and my mom just freaked out. So I'm kind of glad I told her about that. So Anita, your findings were true then, are true now still. But sorry, Elmie, to detract a little bit. Really happy to be here today. I wanted to share some of the results that we saw in our latest Kids and Safety survey Lucian in the crowd, also very responsible for initiating the effort back in the day. I wanted to give you a shout out there. A few things that, that I wanted to highlight to this group is that, unsurprisingly, 60% of parents in Singapore allowed increased screen time for their kids through the pandemic, for remote learning, but also increasingly for entertainment, and even learning new skills like learning how to draw and paint. So kind of the use cases are very, very broad. And we see that 1 in 3 children spend an average of between 3 to 6 hours online a day, very consistent with the findings also in the study that Audrey and Natalie talked about. We also saw that parents had a perception that 82% of them were confident that their kids would seek help from them if they ran into any trouble. And 70% of Singaporean parents have taken the step to have a conversation with their children about online safety. So that's an encouraging statistic. The depth of which they have that conversation, we have not measured yet, so maybe we need to do that in the next round. And one of the other things that we saw was that Singapore is the #1 country in the world where parents are searching for screen time for children. So it does show that everybody is very, very concerned about the topic, screen time and beyond. But do we all feel equipped to do that? We saw that only 29% of parents proactively look for information about about online safety for their kids. So there is this gap, right? Concern is here, screen time searches, very, very high. But what are parents looking for, and do they feel equipped there? We observe that there is a pretty dramatic gap. And 47% of parents find it difficult to find the tools that they need to help monitor and control the child's online usage. So I think we're here today to really, talk about the challenges that we see, some of the solutions that we're thinking about, but also would love to hear some feedback from what you all are observing so that we can think a bit sort of front-footed on this together. Elmie.
Hello, I'm Teresa. I come from TikTok and happy to be here today together with Clara, Rachel, as well as Lynn, to be on this panel to discuss this meaningful topic. I think to add on to what Rachel says, maybe I will add on from the point of view of teens that TikTok has been speaking to. So we have been speaking to teens across the world to actually also find out, what do they want from their parents. And there are 5 tips that we heard from teens that we are now incorporating in-app into the digital parenting tips that we are giving parents. So like what Anita was saying just now, I think the kids are saying that, parents, help me understand the rules. So they do want to understand, how to navigate the online world. So, they are saying that, let's not avoid the topic, let's talk about it. And then, then we'll be in more control of our online experience. The second that they were asking for is be available to chat. Whenever, we need to talk to you, trust us that, we'll come to you and, be available to chat to us. And most importantly, they also ask parents not to panic when things go wrong. I think same as parents are very worried about their kids, right? Kids are equally worried about getting their parents worried. So it works both ways, and sometimes they hide things amongst themselves because they also don't want their parents to over-worry about them. So they are saying that when we come to you, we know that we have done something wrong, but please calm down, please listen to us, and please do not shout at us. So I think this is also one call from kids themselves. And last but not least, to Anita's point, they are saying that do trust me, trust that I can be in control of my online world, and do trust that I will come to you, if I feel that I'm not in control. And last but not least, the last thing that they are saying that is respect my privacy. Like parents, they usually do not want parents to be on the same platform as them. So when we put in tools like family pairing, we allow parents and kids to actually come to a conversation where they pair their QR code together. So that, you're not just, restricting their screen time, restricting what they're searching, but you are more involved in that conversation that, if I pair with you, these are the settings that we agree to put in place together, and yet I'm respecting your privacy. So a lot of our thinking around how we design our tools are around, conversations that we have with teens and parents and educators, so that, we could better respect what they are thinking about having that agency online. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa and Rachel. Okay, I guess by now some of you would already have questions in your mind. The questions are coming in to Mentimeter. So for those of you we will have a Q&A session later. You can actually come up to the mics later after maybe another two or three more questions. But for those of you who already want to put up the questions before you forget it, you can just go and log in into the Mentimeter, and the questions are already coming up. And if you find similar questions in the Mentimeter, please upvote them. For time's sake, I will have to pick questions that are more popular than the others. Okay. So thank you so much, Rachel and Teresa. Now, maybe the next question that we might want to know from our tech companies here is, what are the experiences or prevalent incidents regarding children and digital risk that, from the tech company's perspective, that you have experienced and you are able to share with us, our audiences over here? Perhaps you start with Clara.
Okay, got it. So good morning, everyone, and yes, thank you for being here with us on a Saturday morning. Really important topic, and really glad to be here with Elmie and familiar friends from the industry. So I think I've learned a lot from this morning, and I think that as a platform that is well loved by many teenagers here in Singapore, in particular on Instagram, I think coming to places like this and hearing feedback from people who do research and work with, families and youth in the community is really, really important. I think from our perspective, that partnership is really key. And rather than really, dwell on some of the, incidences that we're seeing on the platform, maybe I'll give you some sort of a sense of how we think about building the platform and building experiences for young people. And later on, I'll touch on also, therefore, what does that mean for some of the tools that we've built that we can share about more with you. So I think, taking a step back and looking at a high level, how we build products for young people, we have a framework that we call the Best Interest of the Child framework. It derives from the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Basically, it says that when you're building products and services for young people, take their best interests, in mind, their well-being in mind. And so we have, a process that really bakes in these standards into how we design experiences for young people. But we need to pair that as well with research and also really direct feedback from people who actually use the platforms. And we have done a lot of design jams and co-design consultations around the world, including here in Singapore, with many people who are in the room, to really understand what are some of the challenges that people face on the ground, some of the harmful experiences, and what do they expect from us, right? Both in terms of the rules that we design, also the experiences, the tools that we build for young people, but also their parents. So if I were to then take a three-pronged approach to how we build these experiences, right? The first is really around responsible empowerment. I think that, Teresa talked about how young people, have a sense of autonomy. They want people to trust them. They also self-supervise. So for us as a platform is to really respect that desire for autonomy, especially because we're building tools for teenagers. And for those of you who remember what it's like being a teenager or have teens, they want autonomy. But we also want to make sure that we're balancing that autonomy with the fact that there are risks that they are going to experience online. So how do we strike that balance? One particular tool that we're really proud of that we rolled out around the world last year was parental supervision. Supervision, we don't call it control because we understand that too much control can also backfire. It's about how do you strike that balance, give parents visibility about what their teens are doing online, and use that visibility as a platform for conversation. So, Anita talked about how there is a gap, right, in awareness of what parents think they know their kids are doing online or experiencing online and what actually happens. And there's also, a lack of understanding when we hear about, teens, when they say, like, when I talk to my parents, I don't think they understand what social media means to me. It's more than just looking at videos and pictures. It's my social network. It's my way of communicating with my friends. So how do we bridge that gap? And so we're trying to build tools around that to support this closing of the gap and conversations between parents and teen around responsible empowerment. The second prong is really age-appropriate experiences. And here is a whole bunch of things, right? On the one hand, it's about rules that we built into the platform that say that, hey, we need to have higher thresholds for young people, right? And how do we sort of like bake in certain experiences and protections at the get-go for young people? So for example, if you're under 16, you join Instagram, but you're over 13, we default you into a private account. And that means that you can't share your location, your profile is not public, it's not searchable, unconnected adults can't contact you or message you. So that's an age-appropriate experience. And third is really data-driven innovation. I talked about how we rely on research, consultations with parents and teens. All that is about keeping us accountable that what we're building actually works and that we're always improving what we're building for teens and for parents. So that's kind of our overarching sort of approach. And I think through that approach, we feel like, we want to be connected to people like you to really hear about what are the challenges you face, because that is something that we take in and how we build our experiences and products.
Hi everyone. What a Saturday morning well spent to be, surrounded by people who are really care about safety for their children, for their students, or for their friends and for their families, and also to be around amazing female leaders in the tech company, and also with Dr. Elmie as well. So I believe online harm is a reflection of offline harm. It is not a new topic. For example, cyberbullying, misinformation, disinformation. This is a topic that has been, rooted in the society for a long time. And for example, I really interested by the study by Dr. Audrey in terms of the statistics around the world, and also how Singapore fit in terms of the rank of the concern, whether it's misinformation, disinformation, or whether it's abuse and harassment. So I think it is a trend there, but for us at Twitter, the way we look at it, how can we address the most urgent, the most harmful topic that will result in the offline harm? How can we looking at that? And also some of the trend that we have seen in Singapore also regarding the security and safety issues. That's why we really focus to make sure how can young people, everyone can have access to these security tools. We have seen some of the compromised account, some of the hack account, but how can they prevent that? By, for example, two-factor authentication. It sounds very simple. Everyone knows about it, but then actually not. And it's like more than 50% will also prevent from this type of incident. So that's why we're working with NGOs, working with the school to be able to provide education more in terms of the security and safety features. How can young people can control their experience online, right? And the most importantly, if they face this issue, how can they report? How can they get help and get the support that they need? So I think this is something that we are really focusing on, and to make sure that it's easy, to make sure that they will be notified and informed. The second thing that we're looking at is that we have seen, for example, some kind of impersonation. And that's why Twitter, we already rolled out Twitter Blue subscription in Singapore on the 23rd of March. And to be able to prevent some kind of impersonation, to be able to identify as well as to prevent bot or even like spam. These are the new products that we are launching it out, and also to make sure that this is a real people. We allow anonymity on the platform, but it doesn't mean that these accounts are entitled to abuse and harass others. So the rules and the policy, the reporting channel, and the safety features are there for young people, for everyone to be able to access and to control the experience. Thank you.
Thank you. So our panelists have actually gone beyond answering the question to sharing the parental controls and what the companies themselves are actually doing to protect our kids. And this actually relate to quite a number of questions that are coming in or that have already come in on the Mentimeter. The best thing about the Mentimeter is that our panelists do not see the questions, right? Do you all know the questions? No. Okay, so I'm going to ask the questions related, the 3 questions related to the tools. Maybe Rachel or Teresa can take these questions that are related to what they are doing. So one of the questions is, how are tech companies protecting our youth who trend on social media for inappropriate content, trend with inverted commas in them? For example, explicit vulgar content, vaping, and what can the educators or parents do for the parents who are, for the youth who are involved? The next question, and you can take it together and in terms of discussing what do the companies have. The design or interface of social media is very addictive, and without knowing it, a child can spend hours on it. So what suggestions can you give to parents with respect to managing screen time duration? And maybe the third question, to lump it together. Great that platforms are putting in age restrictions, but kids who are savvy enough can easily get around this. So what are your thoughts on how to make the age restrictions more effective? So any one of you can take the questions.
I can take the first one about trending content. So on TikTok, if the audience uses TikTok here, when you open TikTok, the first thing that you see is what we call a For You feed. And this For You feed is where users scroll through content after content. So I think how we think about content on our platform that appears on your For You feed, there are 4 steps that we think about. I think number 1, whether the content itself actually violates our own community guidelines, which is we call what the rules of our platform. Yeah, so if it violates our community guidelines, we'll be removing such violative content on our platform. So that's the first line of defense. I think second, we age restrict mature content. I think that will very much depend on Dr. Elmie's third question on the effectiveness of your age assurance mechanisms, right? Which we can talk about it later as well. So I think age restriction to make sure that mature content only gets to the adults, and when we say about adults are those 18 years and above. Those between 13 and 17, there's going to be more restrictive defaults, privacy settings that we'll set in place. I think the third one, when I talk about the For You feed, we also talk about what type of content do we make eligible for the For You feed. We usually think about that to make sure that the content that appears and is recommended on the For You feed is meant for a broader audience. And this is disregard of your age group. It could be also the older audience. We want to make sure violent graphical content do not appear. And some of these are made ineligible in the For You feed. And the last one, which we have been talking a lot about, is really empowering our community to actually have all the tools, the info and resources to actually have control of their online experience. And when we talk about these tools, it's not just the users on our platform, but I think parents, educators, caregivers are our very important partner in this, to make sure that they are well aware of the tools as well, so that they could have that open conversations with the teens that are using the platform. And that's why we are all here today, to make sure everybody is well aware. But when we talk about the tools as well, I think a lot are also designed around age appropriate. We talk a lot about having agencies for our teens, right? But at the same time, there are also intentional decisions that are also made by the platforms themselves. For example, for those 13 to 15 years old on TikTok, we actually do not allow direct messaging from them. So that would tackle, them talking to online strangers or somebody messaging them, because that's off by default for them. We also private their accounts by default, which means that you cannot be following strangers and all. Only your friends will be able to comment on our platform. So some of these age-appropriate tools we have put in place to tackle and giving them the empowerment to do so. But to the point about trending, I think there were three steps, community guidelines, age restriction, as well as making it eligible for the For You fee. Yeah.
Should I go next? Or okay. And thanks everyone for the very insightful questions. I think we are also thinking very hard around age appropriateness, age restrictions. It's a very live topic amongst many of us in the room today. And I can also share a little bit around sort of our parental controls and tools that you can support families. But I do want to stress that, underpinning the earlier sharing, it is layered on a foundation of the relationship. And how do we build that level of trust and dialogue? So I kind of unpack it at sort of these three layers. Maybe starting from the fundamentals, right? So how do we support families to have conversations around the rules of the road, digital responsibility, empowerment? I love the notion that Natalie introduced around being a member of the community. That is the responsibility that we have, not just to ourselves, but to our neighbors and beyond. So what we had developed many years back was a tool kit called Be Internet Awesome. It has actually manifested itself physically in the online safety park. For those who are familiar with Road Safety Park in East Coast that we all grew up with, this is the online version of it where we translate these into very tactile experiences for families to participate in, to learn how to build everything from strong and safe passwords to being kind online. And what does that mean? How do you respond in the face of that situation? And it's so important to have that conversation before you get to the moment of dilemma, right? You want to keep kids primed for the moment of choice when you know what it means to be kind in that moment in particular. So I think that's the first level of sort of supporting families to have that conversation. The next level then I see is what tools can parents employ to support the conversation that has ideally happened already, right? And yesterday we had a group of parents in the office as well to talk a little bit around what they faced. And a lot of them said that actually, without a relationship, people default to controls because that's the easy way. You're like, oh, cut off access, limit screen time. But in the absence of that discussion with the kid beforehand, then the circumvention happens, right? The circumvention around I use my parents' account to be able to access this so that, I can get around the kids' portion happens. So I think it's important to settle the first layer. So the second piece around tools, and we design it with in mind for the parental and family experience. So obviously from an age group perspective, there's YouTube Kids that I talked about. Clearly that's very much for the, up till 9 at most. You already see that your tweens are yeah, no, YouTube Kids. I think it's a little bit juvenile for me. And then so we've created something called supervised experiences, which we call for tweens, sort of the 9 to 12 kind of bracket, where they're starting to explore, sort of slightly more mature not mature content, that's the wrong word for this, but sort of content that's not just cartoon style. So that's where, through Family Link, which is a tool that we give for parents to link their own Gmail accounts to their kids' Gmail accounts. How do you supervise that experience and still have that level of trust, but with kind of the parent around the shoulder as a safeguard and check? So Family Link is the tool that underpins supervised experiences. And then obviously on the main platforms like YouTube, for example, also having age-restricted content so that individuals below, whether maybe they're between 13 to 18, they are age-restricted on the kinds of content that they see because they may not have the skills yet to interpret what it is they're seeing. And obviously this is also governed by the universe of community guidelines, which does not allow violence, nudity, content. I think vaping came up, sort of illegal substance stuff on that will be taken down under our own universe of policing, which we call our community guidelines. So that's kind of the tools perspective on this. But what I wanted also to address, and probably slightly different from my colleagues around the table, is in terms of the universe of products that Google is responsible for, which is everything from Gmail to search as well, and unlike which are more fundamental, right? So people have your Gmail accounts where you have your age tagged to this. We make sure that this is reflected in the experience that you have when you're signed into different products, and we want to make sure that kids who go onto YouTube, cannot just falsely declare their age and then therefore access something. So this hopefully addresses the point around circumvention, where we want to use tools to be able to make sure that they are directed to the right experience. And if you start seeing that they are, the pattern of watching seems to suggest that they are not the age that they declare, how do you send them a nudge to say, can we check? And you know, this is still a live debate around the world, as you all know. But you know, that is something, a conversation that we're very actively engaged in, also in the Singapore context. Back to you, Elmie.
Problems turning on my microphone. So I will address the time, what do you call that, the addiction, right? Quite directly. So I think for those of you who are on Instagram, I just want to make sure that you all know that we have a tool called Time Spent that you can find under Settings. And in there, and I just checked mine, you can actually see day by day how much time you've spent on Instagram. You can also set sort of a time limit to say, send me a reminder after 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or longer to take a break, and you can set a daily time limit, right? So those tools are available to everyone who is on Instagram. I would then, and mine is 0 today, because I came here early for this parenting, digital parenting talk. So I encourage you all to take a look at it, and if you have a teenager who is on it, to also take a look and maybe have a conversation around it. But I talked also about parental supervision tools. How does that work, and where does time spent come into it? So the fundamental sort of basis to start parental supervision is that the parent and the teen have to both consent to participate. Okay, once you've sort of, I know I used Teresa's word, once you've kind of like twinned and paired up, what parents actually can see in their dashboard is exactly how much time their teen is spending on Instagram, on a sort of a breakdown. What else can they see? I'll just give you a rough sense if you haven't explored the tool yet. You can also see, who are the Instagram accounts that your teen is following. That kind of gives you a sense of the type of content they're viewing. You can see the accounts that are following your teen. And that's also a very interesting one. Are they friends? Are they like, strangers, like fishy people? So that's also a really interesting, so insightful sort of insight into how your teen, experience is in Instagram. But the one control that we do provide parents is actually time spent. The rest of it is really more on a supervisory basis, so you can kind of see the kind of content they see. Except for private messaging, we don't let parents see that. But yeah, so the thing that you can control there is time spent. And so I think for parents in the room who are interested to work with your teen around sort of managing how much time they're spending on Instagram, do check that out, parental supervision tools. There is an insert in your goodie bag with some information there about those tools, and any questions always come to me and ask. The last question that came in the Mentimeter was about age. How do you check for age, right? So yeah, for a lot of social media platforms, it's usually 13 and above. And the reason why we encourage people to be honest about their age is because we built all these protections for you from 13 to 16, so please be accurate with your age. But we know that in Singapore, sometimes parents will open an account for their child. Sometimes I've gone to parenting events, they come up to me and say, hey, I've been locked out of my Instagram account, and they come with their kid, and the kid's like 10 years old, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. So I think, as parents, to play your part, and to make sure that, if you have a child, make sure that they're of the right age when they do sign on for an Instagram account or a Facebook account, for example. But what do we do, right, as a platform? To verify age. Now, first I will say that this is a debate that is very rife in our industry. I think as global platforms, we need to strike that balance between, on the one hand, minimizing the data that we collect from our users. Also, number two is, some people say, why don't you just use photo ID so that we can check your age, right? and verify. I think the challenge with that is, apart from data minimization, is that there are a lot of parts in the world where access to photo ID is actually not common, especially for younger people. So we need to find an approach that is robust, that minimizes data, but then also helps us to protect younger people online. And so for us, we've actually been experimenting with different technological sort of approaches, using machine learning to detect patterns of behavior. And a new thing that we have also sort of partnered with a company in Europe that we're piloting in a couple of countries in the world is facial recognition. Sometimes if we detect that, hey, this person doesn't feel like an older person, we may say, please take a selfie of yourself. And then through the technology of our partner, they're able to kind of guess, like, is this a young person or an older person who should be allowed on the platform? But we do this in a way that's privacy protecting, because no image is actually captured, no personal identification is actually captured. It's just really an algorithm that kind of like does a very quick sort of like age estimate. So I think that, yeah, I mean, it's not an easy answer. We don't have a straight up sort of solution, but we're just trying and testing different things.
Because my colleagues here already addressed some of the features, but for us, like at Twitter, online safety has always been #1 priority. We want to continue to come up with the new technology, new investment to be able to address online harms. And for children under the age of 18 years old, we have a dedicated policy and rules. Also, safety by default. What are the content that are flagged as sensitive? They will not be able to access that. Also, age verification as well that we're trying to improve. How can we also make sure that people at the age appropriate access the right level of information? But one thing we have to think about is, we don't want bad content either. We don't want a content that is violating our rules and policy. So what are the best way in terms of doing that? The opportunity is to work with minors, young children, to think about their digital footprint. Go back to responsibility of like digital citizenship. Like, what are the footprint that they want to leave on online world, right? And it should be something that is positive, and also something that they want to think about long before they tweet or post. So this is something that we really want to make sure how can we continue our efforts on media literacy, to also working with the partners like Samaritan of Singapore, to also ensuring well-being and also wellness, to have the right resources there on the platform. So for when people search on Twitter, they would have like the resource there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a very quite in-depth and very broad sharing of the different types of tools and controls that the different platforms have. And thanks, Clara, for sharing. So I just checked. If you haven't checked your Insta, how much time you're spending, it's actually quite simple. You actually there's these 3 lines on the top right-hand corner. Just go there and then click on time spent. And my time spent on daily average over last week is 18 minutes. So I'm actually quite good. So yeah, so for my bosses who are there, so yeah, I'm actually doing quite a lot more work than going on my Insta. But I think now going back to the Mentimeter questions, I have received some questions to myself also. Very interestingly, now that we have shared quite a bit of the restrictions and controls, the question that I need to answer is, Dr. Elmie, why are you not asking the top questions? Well, the reason why I have not yet reached the top question was because I lumped the questions on parental controls and tools that the tech companies have, and for all of them to actually share what are the tools. So now that we have gotten that out of the way, and now that you know that you have in your goodie bags that you have quite a number of information on these controls and restrictions, now let's get to the top question. And we have time for a few more questions, as well as for those who are intending to actually come up and speak up on the microphones. So the 2 questions actually that can be lumped together is that the first question, which has quite the most votes, is the battle for audience attention. And I think this is kind of true in the sense, right? That when we look at TikTok or Insta, we get into mindless scrolling, right? And we just chalking up time on the social media. So it's all about audience, it's our attention and time economy, right? It's now currently being taken to extremes, according to this commenter. And it's taking a toll on digital well-being. Is there any ways that I read as any way for the tech companies to actually slow down the monetization of attention, right? So let me go down and see whether anything, yeah. So if any one or two of you would like to take that question.
Okay, gotta turn on my microphone. I think that to kind of take a step back, right? I think that what we're trying to probably say, at least I'm trying to say, is that different people will come to our platforms for different things. Some people actually go there, right, for business purposes, right? They're actually looking to create a business presence. They're trying to connect with audiences to sell a product. Some people are going there for entertainment. And I think at the end of the day, what we want to do is to give people a whole range of different tools so that you have that ability to, depending on why you're going to the platform, that you're doing it intentionally, and that you're doing it intentionally, meaning like also using the tools intentionally to make sure that your experience is one that is safe and that actually, helps you to manage your well-being. It's not a one size fits all for everyone. If you are a creator, you'll want to try get as big an audience as you can, because that's something that is for your livelihood. But for some, it's about connecting in a more intimate setting with your friends and your family. And there are a range of tools that allow you to curate that experience. And I think that, for us as platforms, there are limits as to what we can do. We can build all these tools, but the question is, we need to work with partners to be able to then say, hey, there are all these tools. How do we, help people understand what the tools are there for? And how can they then use these tools to kind of be more intentional about how much time they spend or what they do on our platforms. I think that's sort of part of the conversation that we're here today, and part of why I think us as Meta, we're partnering with many community organizations, including Anita, and I know she also partners with other platforms as well, is because we want to make sure that organizations who are working in this space, who work with families, they actually know the tools that we build. And we're always building new tools, so we want to update them on what's new and make sure that that gets sort of propagated into the community, right? And people actually sort of know how to use it to kind of manage that experience.
Thank you, Clara. I think that's, before I move on to the next question, anyone would like to go to the mic and ask your question? Perhaps your Wi-Fi is down and you can't access the Mentimeter or something, and you can actually, there are mics offline settings. Anyone? Okay, if there's no one, to the next question. Okay, this is, okay, there's a broader question on ChatGPT or the AI tools, and like Bard, are growing tools that children are also starting to access. Broadly, do you see risks in contents curated by AI? Okay.
Yeah. I want to maybe highlight two aspects. And I would say that generative AI, which is the family under which ChatGPT, Bard, and other tools that are based off large language models. So I think, it is an evolving space of technology, even though it has been there for a while. I think, the latest, like, hitting the press and stuff like that, has not just shown us the potential of it, which is like, really quite sometimes beautiful poetic responses, but also some of the garbage that can come out of it. And I don't know how many of people have tried that, but I think I want to point out one concern that I have, and Elmie, we discussed earlier, like emerging trends piece, right? So this is one of my top preoccupations now. And I was talking to a group of MOE HODs 2 weeks ago about this. I think I'm concerned about preserving the nature of critical thinking in us, in our communities, in our kids. And when I grew up, it was like, oh, you don't know, go to the library, go and research, read some Britannica and an encyclopedia. Okay, maybe Britannica is very old, but and then it moved into search, right? And our focus on search is to always propose authoritative content that comes up first in your 10 blue links, for example. But that already, you can argue to some extent, you need to keep forcing critical thinking because actually information is served relatively quickly. With ChatGPT, with some of the generative AI models, it's like synthesized for you. I think that we need, as parents and as individuals really, with access to these tools, continue to preserve our power of critical thinking. Just because it sounds authoritative does not mean it is authoritative. How do we ask ourselves the question and dig deep into that? So I think that's one piece that I wanted to say around generative AI tools. The second piece, and Elmie, and tell me if I'm interpreting the question correctly, I think there are concerns that we continue to have around like copyright, around how do you tackle misinformation, moderating content that is generated out of these AI models. And that, I would say, is a live and unresolved discussion as we speak, and we should continue to pay quite close attention to it. I think the first takeaway is let's just be careful around the element of critical thinking and making sure that we pause before we just ingest whatever it is thrown out by models like these, I would caution.
Thank you, Rachel. Maybe the next two questions, maybe you can get Lynn or Teresa to answer. And this set of questions pertain to how the tech companies themselves see the role of parents, or what can they actually advise in terms of the role of parents in terms of keeping kids safe online. So there are a couple of questions pertaining to that, so maybe you can just jot down. One question is, how can parents help transition teens out of screen time controls as they get older? So we know there's screen time control, but how do we help the teens transit out of these screen time controls? The next question, how do I broach the subject of online safety with my 13-year-old daughter, who is an introvert and not intuitive in sharing her online activities? And maybe for the next question, and I'm just about how your view on parents can help. It's overwhelming for parents to know all the various tools. I find it overwhelming too. There's always tools, and there's always many different platforms, and different platforms have similar tools, but some are not so similar. So it's overwhelming for parents to know all the various tools, how to help them make better sense and practice these new updates on controls. And there are always updates on controls, right? So perhaps any one of you can share.
I will start first. In terms of how to control the screen, I think the best thing that we can do is parents should be an example. How can we actually control our screen time? I think it's probably one of the most difficult things to make sure that, okay, let's go outside and then have some other activities to really spend the quality time without screen. By setting an example, I think it is very important because children observe what we do at home. Sometimes you are so confused, how did they get this from, right? But actually, it's also come back to the parents. So I think that is the first thing. The second thing is also go back to how can young people or any user control their experience on the platform. When you spend, just think about it, it's not good. For example, for your eyes, for your physical, you're not supposed to look at the screen all the time, or the posture as well. It's also have some kind of physical impact. I don't want you to spend money on acupuncture, but we also need to think about, what is our mental, physical, and also the consequence as a whole. But then when it's come to learning, also what is the right appropriate time that you want to spend on? Is there a break to do something else? In terms of planning, like each day, how many hours that we are planning to do this, right? So I think I'll go back to the planning and control experience. The second one is about 20 years old, learning about introverted person. So there are many ways in terms of how to learn to control the experience. For example, I work with one of the NGO in Thailand to work on interactive game. So if they are introvert, they can also try to explore the game to look at the example. For example, one of the example, it was a leak clip and how can they get help. By playing the game to also understand that this is a real world based on the true story, the consequence, and this is something that they can learn from. So not just only by reading, I think we want to have something fun, something that is very interesting. So game or fiction or some other like learning tool can be very important. The third one, I believe IMDA and MCI are one of the best regulator in terms of ensuring Singaporean user are safe. So they are already working on in terms of updating and how can make it easy. So, and we are very much like welcome the opportunity to updating the tools or like the resources with the IMDA and MCI. Thank you.
I think when we talk about screen time, actually it applies to all ages. So even, for my own father, I have to kind of set screen time limit for him on TikTok. Because, number one is to kind of increase his awareness and also, learning how to pause, right? Yeah, when it's time to sleep. So I think for us, even determining the screen time limits, it's also a formula on its own. So we have been consulting, public health experts. Finally, we have been talking to the digital wellness lab at Boston Children's Hospital, and they came up with 60 minutes as the time limit that we should set by default. So what we did is for those that are under 18, we have currently actually set 60 time limit by default. And then we'll see from the insights, how people actually, do they pause when that, 60 minutes time actually comes up, or do they continue with the experience? So a lot is that whole iteration process to actually see, what works. But they can also actually set below 60 minutes using their own control, but we are trying to see what works by default and all. And that applies across all ages. So in terms of your screen time that you spend online. But I feel that maybe not just focusing on screen time, but how are you being in control of your own digital well-being online? Like, how do you feel positive? Do you feel joyful when you are scrolling through the feed? Are you learning new things in the process? Or, are you going down that rabbit hole of, having a lot of distressing content, or, extreme dieting or fitness content being, fed to you and you felt, negative and distressed in the process? So I think a lot of this digital well-being concerns actually come about because you may not feel control of your experience. You feel you are, but as you go along, you feel that you are actually going down that whole rabbit hole itself. So I think these are things that we constantly think about when we think about the tools that we want to put on our platform. And recently, we came out with this refresh option where you can actually start anew. So you can actually refresh your whole public feed itself so that you will not be scrolling through repetitive content and you will not be scrolling through what you feel may not be appropriate for you. So we are also thinking about this whole behavioral mindset that someone goes through, to take care of someone's well-being and all. Yeah. In terms of parenting, I myself is not a parent, so I don't think I'm the best person to advise another parent here. But now I'm like the cool auntie in the room because I'm from TikTok. So all the kids will come to me and, start telling me on what they're seeing on TikTok. And also, like, hey, I saw this trend, should I be aware of it? So I became my friend's counselor for their kids because they are more open to telling me things. I feel that sometimes it may not be the burden to be all on the parents. but maybe someone that's trusted by the kids around them. It could be their older siblings, it could be their grandparents, it could be their teachers, or even their tutors. So I think be open, don't take the burden all on yourself as a parent. Because I feel that when I observe my friends, right, they're like, screen time limit, 30 minutes, after that you go back and do your homework. So, a lot of this conversation, but when they come to me, they tell me more about what they see online and what are they experiencing, like we have this private group talking about all these things and all. So I feel that it's really building your kids' trusted circles around. And maybe from there, then you kind of decide, how do you kind of manage that relationship as well. Yeah.
Okay, Teresa, the cool auntie, is it? Okay, she's the coolest auntie here, lah. I mean, by virtue of you being on TikTok. Okay, anyways, okay, we have like a couple more minutes left. We are in between. We're just one step, a couple of minutes away from lunch, and I'm sure all of us have sat through quite a very enriching and sessions so far. Maybe I'll just ask one final question, and maybe I'll get the panelists to wrap up the session. And there are some questions that we are not able to ask due to time, but the organizers will then pass the questions directly to each of the specific company that is directed to them, and for them to actually reply to the questions. I'm not so sure how the organizer is doing this, whether the questions are actually anonymous or the questions are anonymous. Okay, then perhaps there's one way for them to actually email everyone in attendance the answer to the questions, so everyone gets an answer to the questions. So, but just one quick question from Twitter, and I just expect a yes or no. No, I'm just joking. This is not a congressional hearing. Okay, so but you can answer in elaborate terms. Okay, so I work on cyber safety with MOE schools, and because this has the most votes currently, I work on cyber safety with MOE schools and Twitter, and it seems that Twitter seems to be where the children go to find inappropriate content. That's quite surprising, and well, yeah. And they find this appropriate content through adult links. So what is being put in place to stop this?
So one thing that is so unique about Twitter is because we are public, right? We are public platform, and but it doesn't mean that we don't have features or measures for young user, which is under the age of 18 years old. Which is we have the safety tools, and that is the safety by default, that 18 years old underage will not be able to access sensitive content, also in terms of like graphic content, and also it also depends on what kind of content. Like there are so many types of it. For example, if it's child sexual exploitation, if that is the case, there is no place on Twitter. It's against our rules. It's something that our CEO, Elon Musk, is emphasized as our priority. We invest technology. We don't want this type of content on the platform, and we also ensure that how can parents, even like the user, can report to Twitter to Signal. So we would love to work with you to understand more about the issues. But we do have like the measures in place for that. Thank you.
Yeah, so reporting, self-reporting is a strong component.
Like safety, we have like safety tools. I really want to have like presentation because you can like see exactly where to go to. But it's very easy because if you under the age of 18 years old, you will not be able to access the content that we consider as a sensitive media content.
Thank you. Okay, maybe a minute and a half for each one of you to wrap up and share your thoughts. And let's surround your thoughts on this particular question also, which is a very positive question in the sense. How do you think from the media company's perspective that the Media Literacy Council, with all of you being members of the Media Literacy Council, as well as parents and educators and teachers, can all synergize and work together to build online digital safety for our kids? Yeah. Maybe we start from Clara.
Hello. that's a really big question for 1.5 minutes. But I would say that at the Media Literacy Council, we all come from different parts of society. We have MOE, we have IMDA, MCI, we have all the platforms, we have so many community organizations like Touch, and that's and experts like Elmie, obviously, is to really come together and share insights from the different parts of the elephant that we can touch, so that we know that while platforms are building tools, we also hear insight from the ground and from experts about what the ground situation is like, and be more effective, I guess, when we're making programs and collaborating around programs so that they are more effective and more tailored to some of the challenges that we collectively face in Singapore.
On to what Clara said around, I think, the open space for conversation, I wanted to add on to, from the parents' perspective, that I still think that being a parent is a very tough job, but I used to get really terrified of all the things that I needed to be aware of, or like sleep train lah, eat the right food lah, da, da, da. Then I realized my husband and I crystallized it down to secure attachment. And if I just focus on that, I think things will be okay. I mean, look, ask me again in 10 years. But for now, I think that if we fixate on that as the connection with the child, I think it simplifies and hopefully creates a foundation for us to deal with whatever may come. Because what happens today is just today, right? What happens in 5 years is still going to be premised and probably fixed better with that level of relationship. So just an encouragement for all of us in the room, I suppose, parents and aunties and uncles, to continue to build that as well as the foundation.
I'm glad that Elmie gave me 1 minute beyond a yes or no. Yeah. Yeah. So I think one thing that I really want to say here is what Anita was saying just now. I think it really depends on the parents' literacy. And I feel that I totally agree that those that are highly literate are able to, communicate digital info literacy, media literacy knowledge with their children. But how do we kind of reach out to parents who are not as literate? And usually they just leave their children to the devices, right? Because they felt that might be the way to actually keep their children happy and joyful. So I think we are thinking about having greater outreach, like working with Touch Community Services as well, to see, as well as MOE, to see how we can go more into schools. Through parent support groups, they have their own, networks, and that could spread on to even more, parents out there that may not have equal support in terms of literacy. And as you said just now, it's very difficult, to understand all the tools that are all around, especially if they are not on the platform itself. So how do we make sure that we get them onto it, to make sure that they are well aware of taking care of their the online safety of their children together with us? Yeah, I think that's critical.
I think making internet safe is a job that will never end. It requires partnership, and MLC have like the best expert on the work that they are doing. The tech company, everyone want to be involved and trying to solve the online safety issues. I think we are at the beginning, and like in the journey in terms of how can we ensure with the evolving problem, with the evolving issues like new technology, how can we address this issue as soon as we can, as well as to know what would be the new trend, the features to address this thing. So I think by working together, I think we are on the right track.
I like how Lynn sums it up. We are at the beginning of the journey. It's a journey that never ends. And with that, can we just put our hands together to give a warm round of applause to our... Okay, back to the MC.